Welcome back, folks, and hopefully you're following right along with the series and you're just coming off of my scoreboard video. Because today we're going to talk about execute detect and really scoreboards as well, and how to control game mode with players going in and out of protected regions. And behind me, I have something that makes use of execute detect and scoreboards, and we're going to try it out right now. So you might be wondering, what is it and how does it work? Well, as you can see right now, I'm not in creative mode, and if I try to break blocks, nothing happens. That means I'm in adventure mode right now, and adventure mode is a great mode to put your players in when they're in protected regions, because that means you can control what they can and cannot do. It's a perfect thing to do. So what we need to do is basically allow players to get outside of the region and change their game mode back. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is jump on this glowstone here, and you can see it gave me some text here: exiting protected region, game mode change to survival, and sure enough, I can do damage to blocks. If there were any squiddies around, I could go and punch them. I was kind of looking forward to that, but I guess they ran off. They knew my plan. At any rate, I am in survival mode right now, and I'm outside of the protective wall of the protected area, basically. So I can't get back in unless I use these teleport pads. And when I use the teleport pads, I'm back inside, and then I'm back in adventure mode. And as we noted in the previous video for scoreboards, right now I'm in the green team, which means I'm in the no PvP team. And when I go outside of it, I'm put into the PvP team, so now my player name is red. So you can tell that I'm outside of a protected region when my team color is red, and when I'm inside, it is green. So how do we pull this off? So basically each one of these pads has a unique configuration that I'm looking for with the execute detect command to find out whether or not a player needs to be teleported outside of a protected region or back into a protected region. So you'll notice that I have this glowstone. It's actually irrelevant, but below it I have a layer of barrier and then dispensers above it. You'll notice if I use the F3 screen and I point at each one of these dispensers, you'll notice that the facing direction is always west. So they're all basically pointed off in the west direction like that. That's where all the openings are, and that's why you can't see them right now. You can't see them on any of the other sides. You can't see them on the bottom. You can't see it on the top. That's why it's facing, or that's because it's facing west. So that means when you go on top of this, I'm going to do an execute detect and know that the player needs to go to the west. And on the outside here, I have dispensers facing the opposite direction. They're all facing east. And I'm doing a very similar thing. I'm going to break away here. And you can see there's barrier underneath, so I'm detecting when I have a barrier and then a dispenser above it and what direction it's facing, and then that's when I know what direction to teleport the player. So now that you know what's going on topside, let's go look at the commands that make it happen. So this is basically everything responsible for doing all of the things we're going to talk about in this video: protecting regions by controlling game mode, and also operating the teleport pads. So this little chunk of it right here, these little star configurations, they're all responsible for the teleport pads. So let's look at them one at a time. I basically set them up so that teleport pads that teleport players to the north is this top one, south is bottom, and you might figure it out: north, south, east, west. And there's going to be a series of commands that are run, and they all go in this direction. So each one of these is going to be that same sort of thing. So the first command that gets done, we'll look at the north one. Basically what we do is we do our execute detect. So let's explain what the execute detect command really is doing. What the execute detect command does, first of all, the detect portion of it is basically an optional portion, but we do detect when we want to look at specific block types in relation to the player or relation to the object that we're targeting. So what we're doing is we're saying execute a command for all players preserving their position. So these three tildes here is saying, look, we're basically going to look at a specific player each game tick, and we're going to preserve their location, and we're going to detect from that player whether or not 2 blocks down is a dispenser with data value 2. The data values with a dispenser determine what the facing value is. So the dispenser with a data value of 2 is a dispenser that's facing north. So we're basically looking, okay, for all players, we're going to find out whether or not 2 blocks below them is a dispenser facing north. Now, if the detect portion returns true, if it says this is true, then the next portion of the command is basically a command to operate or command to execute upon the detect portion being true. But what we can do is we can chain another execute detect to that initial execute detect and look for another block type and find out if that's true. So we're basically sort of daisy chaining a bunch of if statements that are saying, is this particular configuration true? But there's a noticeable change with this next execute detect command. So the next execute detect is saying execute for the nearest player. Now, you may be wondering, why did it change from all players to nearest player? Well, basically what we're doing is, in that first execute detect, we're looking at all players initially. If it returns true, then basically the command is now focused on that player that initially triggered it. So you can basically think about it as this: the first execute detect established the relevant the relative location as the player. So we were looking at blocks relative to that player. In the next execute detect, we're going to say we're going to target the nearest player again, but it's the nearest player to the previous player that we just targeted. So that means that that's going to be that same player, and we're going to preserve their location again. So the nearest player, so it's basically look at the same player, preserve their location again, then detect from that location if 3 blocks below that player is a barrier. And we supplied a data tag of 0 because there's only one type of barrier. You could do all types of barrier by doing -1, but I really recommend in most cases, if you're looking for just that basic block type, put in 0. So yeah, so now we've basically done a detection for 2 different block types, and because we're using barrier, we know it's basically a configuration, a structure that we've built as an admin, so it's a special location. So anytime you use barrier, it's basically a really helpful block to detect for with execute detect, to know that you need to do something specific with a player. So that's why I use a combination of a block like a dispenser, which has a facing value, and then a barrier, which has which can only be obtained by admins. So just to prove a point, you could use different blocks other than dispensers. You could use droppers. You can use furnaces, because those also have different facing values. You'll notice if I pull up F3 and I point at it, this one's facing east, this one's facing north. So you can use these different blocks to get facing values. It really doesn't matter as long as it does have a facing value. So once that second execute detect is finished, it's basically said we've found the barrier, we've found the block that's pointed a certain direction. Now we need to set a scoreboard value for that player. So we've done scoreboard players set nearest player TP north 1. What this is we're setting a value for a specific objective called TP north. Now, in order for this to work, we need to define that objective. We actually need to set up that objective. So what you have to do for all of these, and actually for a number of things that you have to do with scoreboards in this particular fashion, is perform a command like the following. You do scoreboard, objectives, add. So you're going to be adding a new objective, and then you give it a new objective. We'll just say this. We'll say new objective name. And then you have to put in a placeholder dummy. It's kind of silly. And then you get the next thing is basically the display name of the objective. So you could call it the same thing, new objective name. And there you go. If I hit enter on this, then I would create a new objective called new objective name. I could even say like this is the new objective, and then this display name is new objective name. So they don't have to be the same. It kind of helps, at least in my regard. I usually leave them the same, especially for these TP commands. No one ever really is going to see them, so there's really no sense in giving them different names. So I just did basically scoreboard objectives add TP north, dummy TP north, just as you see here. So once it's added, once the objective is there, then you can basically set the value of it for specific players to different values. So I've set that again, that nearest player, the player we were targeting initially, we've set their objective value for TP north to 1. So this is basically like flipping the switch. This turns it on and says, yes, this event has rung true. We now need to do something for this player. So in every sense of the word, this is really only going to affect one player at a time, because it's only going to operate one game tick at a time, looking at each player. So we've basically found one player that has met these criteria, and we're setting their TP north value to 1. So the next command is basically looking for a player. It's looking at all players, looking for a score TP north minimum. It's looking for a minimum value of TP north of at least 1. Using this particular selector, this particular argument of minimum, just helps us basically mean that this command is going to be binary, that it's going to be 1 when we're doing something and 0 when we're not doing anything. So TP all players with a score of TP north, minimum of at least 1, we're going to TP them in the negative Z direction, which happens to be the north direction, 10 blocks. And that's all we're going to do. We're going to say TP this player 10 blocks north, and then the last one basically flips the switch back off. It says scoreboard players set, all players with TP north, we're going to set it back to 0. And that's all it is. So it's basically flip the switch on, TP them north. This is how we select the right people that need to be TP'd north, and then we're going to change that person right back to 0. So if I haven't made this clear in any in these videos yet, basically command blocks are going to be processed in sequence from negative coordinate values to positive coordinate values. So there's going to be a direction in which, or an order, a sequence in which these commands are pulled off. So since that is positive x, that means that these commands that are pointed off in the x direction, they're going to be processed in this order, 1, 2, 3. So that's why I've organized all of them for each of their different processes in this fashion. So each one of these basically does that same thing for setting the objective value to 1, but it does it for TP West, TP South, TP East, and again for each of these I had to add that objective to the game, and then each one of them teleports in a specific direction and then sets their scoreboard or their objective value back to 0. So that's the on TP back to 0, so on TP off sort of process of it. So you'll notice that none of those actually handled game mode, and we actually do that separately. And before I talk about how we handle game mode, I want to remind everyone, in case you forgot it or didn't see the previous videos, below here I've set up a special floor for the entire protected region. The entire floor of this protected region at layer 0 is glowstone, and that's incredibly rare and very difficult, although not impossible for players to replicate putting glowstone at layer 0. It's not entirely impossible, but what is impossible for any average player to do is to place barrier. Again, this is a great block to use when you want to do specific admin commands for players. So we're basically now going to detect, similar to how we did with the TP pads, for glowstone at layer 0 and then barrier at layer 1. So let's look at players entering a protected region. So what we're going to look at is, first of all, we're going to execute a command for all players within the team PvP. Remember, PvP is for players that are outside a protected region. They're in survival mode. So we're looking at any players that are in a protected region that are basically in PvP. So we've got all players with team PvP. We preserve their location. We're going to do a detect, preserve their X, preserve their Z, but then look at layer 0. This is an absolute value of layer 0. We're going to look for glowstone 0. Again, that's a data value for block glowstone. We're basically looking at basic glowstone and saying, okay, is glowstone at layer 0 where this player is standing? And if that rings true, alright, so I apologize. I had a phone call interrupt me in the middle of this, so I'm just going to jump back in here talking about the second execute detect command. So if we've detected the player has glowstone at layer 0 wherever they're standing, the next thing we want to check for is if they have barrier at layer 1. So again, execute detect, preserve the player that we were just focusing on, preserve their location, detect whether or not we have it the same X, the same Z, but at layer 1, if there's barrier, again, data value 0. If barrier is true, then all we do is do scoreboard players set, the nearest player, enter protected, which means that they are now in a protected region. We need to do stuff with them. So this is, again, another objective value where you want to add that objective value, that objective name to the game on your own. So again, that's going to be scoreboard objectives add, enter protected, dummy, enter protected, whatever display name you want to do for it. So once you've added that objective, then you can set values for it for specific players. So we've set a value of enter protected 1 to the player that is now over the block configuration at the bottom of the world that we consider to be a protected area. So that's, again, we've just flipped the switch on. Now let's look at the next command. Again, these are going to be processing in the positive Z this time because that's the direction these are all pointed off in. So the next command, we're going to display a title for the player. So we're going to display a title for all players with enter protected, minimum value of 1. Title, it just means the type of title we're going to do, so it's a main title. And if you're not familiar with all of these crazy symbols you're about to see next, it's basically JSON code to put in specific types, specific type of text that the game is expecting to see and knows how to process. So there are generators out there where you just want to say, I think what you can Google is Minecraft JSON text generator or Minecraft tell raw generator, something like that. Google that. You should come up with something where you can basically type in, this is what I want to say, and this is how I want it to be displayed, and then it creates the code for you, and that you basically just copy and paste it here. So this is where we're displaying that title that says entering protected region. Okay, so that's just that first title. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to display a subtitle. So again, title, same player that has that scoreboard or the objective value. We're going to do a subtitle, and that subtitle is going to say game mode changed to adventure. So we're changing the game mode to adventure for those players entering a protected region. And this is where we actually do the dirty work. So game mode 2, all players protected entering protected, minimum 1. So it's pretty simple. We're just going to change their game mode to adventure mode. And then we're going to put them in a different team. We're going to do scoreboard teams join no PvP. So they're now in the no PvP team. Again, all players scoreboard enter protected, minimum value equals 1. And that's pretty simple. It's like how we set up the teams in the previous video. And now that everything's been done, we've changed their team, we've changed their game mode, we've displayed titles for them so that they know that that's all happened. All we have to do basically now is flip the switch off. So at the very end, we now do scoreboard players set for all players entering protected minimum 1. Now change it to 0. So what this means is that once a player enters the region, this whole thing fires in one game tick and goes bam, and it takes care of everything in one game tick, and then it shuts off because that player's been handled. Since they now are in the no PvP team, this whole process here at the beginning won't execute anymore because it's looking for players in the PvP team. And then for exiting protected regions, it's basically the same thing. So we do look at players that are in the no PvP team. So if they're outside of a protected region, this time all we're doing is looking for bedrock at layer 0. And that's it. If bedrock is at layer 0, then we haven't done anything to that region. That means that it's basically just the overworld. And we're going to go ahead and say that they've exited protected. So if they're in the no PvP team, which they're not supposed to be, and they're over bedrock, then we need to change them. So we need to say they've exited protected. And then the same thing. In one game tick, we're going to say you've exited protected region, your game mode is set to survival. We're going to change their game mode back to survival, and then we're going to put them in the PvP team and then switch the whole thing off and say exit protected is now 0. So we've done that process, and again, that's going to fire all at once. Now, the great thing about this configuration and the way we've done this is that it's really two things. Because we're basically just looking for a particular configuration, literally just within one little vertical column of the game, it doesn't have to do with an entire region or anything like that. It means that we can basically set up, once we have these command blocks set up and working all the time in the spawn chunks, we can set up protected regions anywhere, and we can set up teleport pads anywhere, and they can be in any particular area of any particular protected region that you put anywhere in the overworld. So the versatility of these command blocks is really astonishing because it doesn't limit you to any number or any particular location for building protected regions. They're basically all handled so long as you follow these rules. The other thing that's really nice about this setup is that we found out that if you use things like region selectors to do a lot of the same things, not only do you have to completely define new regions every time you do this, not only for teleport pads, but for just an entire protected region, it introduced a situation where players could very easily be put in the wrong game mode. It seemed like it was more likely that it was possible that players would get out of a protected region in adventure mode, which means they couldn't do anything, which was kind of terrible. It meant that we could still protect our regions, but it also meant that there was a likelihood that players couldn't do anything anymore. So the way that this is set up, it's actually foolproof. No one should ever be in the wrong game mode. The way I can prove that is that if I go ahead and join the PvP team, while in a protected area, I'm immediately put into no PvP, and my adventure mode, or my game mode is changed to adventure. If I go ahead and join the no PvP team, then I'm fine, it doesn't matter. And basically at this point, if I were to exit the region, everything would be set up correctly for me. What I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to copy this command for joining the no PvP team, and I'll show you that it also applies when you're outside of the area. So if you're ever put into a situation where you're in the wrong team again outside of a protected area, all I'm going to do is do this, and you can see I've exited protected region. I'm in survival mode, so I'm in the correct game mode. Since it's all based off of what team you're in, so long as you initialize players' teams correctly, it really should never go wrong. Players should never be put into a region where we're not detecting it properly and saying this player needs to be in this team and this player needs to be in this team. So once we're changing their teams, we're also changing their game mode to what it should be, regardless of whether or not they're in any other game mode. So basically, this should always work and always be correct. So there you have it, folks. That's execute detect and how we use scoreboards to basically do what I like to refer to as Minecraft event handling, because there's a particular event, a player is standing over a particular configuration of blocks, or is above or below or near configurations of blocks. When that event rings true, then we go ahead and we process a series of commands and say that that event is now over, and that's it. So we use scoreboards and execute detect to do a lot of really cool things. And you're going to see that happen a lot. That's such a versatile process or versatile approach to doing things that you can almost apply that to just about anything you can think of. If there's something you want to do and it's based on blocks that are near the player, you can do that pretty easily. So until next time, I'm not really sure what the next video is going to be about, so I'll just leave that till the next video, I suppose. But I do foresee this video occasionally sort of returning to specific commands to talk about different goals that can basically be achieved by using those commands. So there might be some further elaboration as the series goes along. And as I said before, it's mainly meant to supplement our Kick the Bucket series, just so you can get a really closer look at what we're doing there, because we generally want to just sort of broad brush things and kick the bucket a little bit, and then leave later episodes for maybe more specifics later on. So we'll see where it goes. And since we have got just a few subscribers, obviously this channel is just getting started. For those of you who are watching, I really would appreciate some comments on what parts of the videos do you think are most valuable. What parts of the videos do you think are least valuable? I can take some harsh criticism, so don't be shy. Let me know what you guys think is best, and maybe what video series you are more interested in than others, just so I can focus on things a little bit more directly. Because I do like sort of both ends of it. I like sometimes creating videos that are really quick and maybe just skim across some things so that you can see the purpose of it, and maybe leave it for the more advanced users, just let them figure it out on their own. But then there are other times where I really like to go into detail, because I understand there are people out there that just don't fully understand everything, so I like spending some time with things. So I'm really capable or willing to do either approach, so just let me know. If there's other things you guys that we've given no indication that we're going to do videos on, if you guys are curious about it, let us know, and if we're capable of doing it, we'll go ahead and do it. And that's about it. So that'll do it. I'll catch you guys next time. Later, folks.